Welcome to the 21 and 21 talks, where invited speakers share their 21-minute talks about all kinds of topics. Oh, it is amazing. You can see topics in the 21 and 21 talks that have to do with roller derby leadership lessons. You can see topics like woodworking and mindfulness. You can see all kinds of things. And today is another great talk. This series consists of 21 talks, 21 minutes long, all taking place in, you guessed it, 2021. Now, if you think that supporting association chat through Patreon will make your dog love you more, I can promise you it will. It really will. Your dog will look at you and just there will be even more love in its eyes. So become a Patreon patron by visiting patreon.com/association chat. Okay. For this special 21 in 21 talk, we are hearing from Chuck Espinoza. Now, Chuck is a retired Marine turned technology instructor, farmer, rancher, and amateur bacon enthusiast and bourbon taster. Yeah. And today he'll be teaching us how to properly size our content so our audience can actually see it. Imagine that. Take it away, Chuck.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me on today. And I'm going to talk about properly sizing our display and, more importantly, the content that is on our display for a good viewing experience. Now, I work for VIXA, the Audio Visual Integrated Experience Association, the AV Association. And what I'm going to talk today about is the DISCAS. And DISCAS is actually one of our standards in the AV Association. For a long time, people had the issue of how big should my display be? If I'm presenting a PowerPoint, or I have to present an Excel spreadsheet, or some Word docs, and I want everybody in the room to see, how big should my TV or my projection screen be? And so for a long time, it was a rule of thumb, or guesstimate, looks about right? And we came around with a best practice about 50 years ago. It was a best practice of they called it the 4-6-8 rule. 4 times the image height, 6 times the image height, or 8 times the image height, depending on the task that you had to do. So if my task was, I had CAD drawings that I had to inspect really closely, or medical imaging, something that I really had to get close to the display and look at, we would say the furthest viewer can be no more than 4 times the height of that image. For general viewing, things like Word documents and PowerPoint, it was 6 times. And for full motion video and moving pictures, it was 8 times. That served us well for a really long time, right up until we started getting into our high def resolutions, our high definition displays. And with these high definition displays, we all of a sudden started having more pixels on the screen. So more pixels means the pixels are smaller in the same amount of real estate. We get a sharper image. The curves on images are much nicer, much smoother. It didn't look as boxy. But as a result, when we put letters on the screen and the letters were the same font or whatnot, they would be smaller. They would, we would get more real estate to put the letters, but they would be smaller letters. So this still served us well up until we got to 1080p. And then at 1080p, we really started straining to see PowerPoints and Excel spreadsheets, especially Word docs. PowerPoint kind of scales. So if we use PowerPoint as it's intended, as just, a roadmap with pictures and bullet points, it works out pretty good. It's when we start putting a lot of text on PowerPoint, just like a Word doc or an email. So with our higher definition resolutions, we started not being able to see some of those letters far back as we would. And, this would happen is people go into a meeting and they put their facts and figures on the screen or their the information they need to communicate, and people would squint, or they'd sit in the back and just kind of, yeah, sure, whatever. And I'm listening to the person talk. And so it started to be more and more of an issue. Well, when 4K came in, 4K has a lot of pixels. The images of moving pictures look incredible. The colors are so much better. You can actually get a real green in 4K. But again, we have this problem of I plug in my computer to a 4K monitor and all of a sudden my letters are tiny. So this came to be such a big issue that we took note and said, let's do something about this. So we got a bunch of subject matter experts together, people in the AV industry, and said, how big should these displays be? This content is getting smaller. And so we started realizing that we need to focus more on the content than the actual display, the size of the thing on the screen rather than the display itself. And so we needed to know more about how people see, how your eye holes work. So we called up some optometrists and said, hey, can you help us out with that? So display experts meet optometrists. They get together, they roll some facts and figures, and the optometrists bring math, which is what we love as engineers in the AV industry. I love math. Math gives me quantifiable, repeatable results, something that I can do today and tomorrow and the next day. And when somebody says, why did you do this? We can put it on paper. If something is incorrect or if it's wrong, we can go back to the math and look at why that thing was incorrect or why it failed and amend the math. And then we can do it better tomorrow. So we like math. So they brought in a lot of facts and figures about how the eye holes work, how your eyes see. So they worked on committee for about 6 years together off and on, and we finally get a standard, and that standard is called DISCAS, the display image size for 2D content in audio-visual systems, DISCAS. And what DISCAS is going to look at is not just the size of the display, but the application we're using it for, the task, and the content that's on the display. How big is the content? And more importantly, how far can we see that content and how close we should actually be to the display. You can actually be too close to a display. I mean, think about it. Nobody goes to the movie theater and it's empty. You don't jump in the front row. That's the worst seat in the house, right? Because it hurts. So we want to make sure that when we design a system, that system is good for the closest viewer and for the furthest viewer. The furthest viewer can actually see. The closest viewer won't get a neck pain, and everybody will be happy, happy, joy, joy. Now, I should tell you, there is a lot of math in DISCAS. What we do have for a lot of people who don't like to do the math is we have a calculator online, and that's easy to get to. If you go to Google and you type DISCAS, DISCAS. Oh, there it is right there, DISCAS calculators. There's two different types of calculators, the analytical decision making, and that's for that medical imaging and geospatial analysis, things you really have to discern pixel on pixel. You need pixel on pixel information. So I'm trying to decide the distance between these two pixels, or the what's important between these two pixels. Like if I'm looking at the inside of a patient, and I'm looking at possible things like cancer, and we need to know where to cut, or we need to know where to research on, hey, is this into this organ or not? I really want to see pixels there, especially if they're going to be, cutting on something I might need. Or geospatial mapping, if we're looking at big pictures of the earth and I need to really, really get into it to see if that's is that a bush? Is that a stick or a stone? Or, I'm really trying to get finite details. It's analytical decision making. And the other one is basic decision making. And this is what we do 80 to 90% of our time. It's reading PowerPoints, reading texts, Excel spreadsheets, Word documents, any kind of like written communication. But it can be other things. So we separate these two groups by the pixel for analytical and by the element. And an element is just a group of pixels. It can be any group of pixels. A letter of text is a group of pixels. Details in a painting, however big or small those details are, if you're looking at it on a screen, that's a group of pixels. I can give you an example real quick. Let me go to, okay, here's a great example. I have Sir Oliver Cromwell here, and here is a picture, excuse me, and we're looking at this in an art history class and trying to figure out the time frame of the painting. We don't know it's Cromwell himself, and so they look at the armor and the epaulet and the rivets, and this entire element, this group of pixels here, takes up about 1/3 of the overall screen top to bottom. So this would be about a 33% element. And now I have to concentrate on the brush strokes of, as Cromwell said, I want to be painted warts and all. So he has a little wart up here on his head. So we want to look at the brush strokes and at some of the shading in the work. Well, it's too small to be seen from a distance, so I have to blow it up. What I'm actually doing is making this element take up more of a percentage overall top to bottom of the screen. Excuse me. So it's not just text. It's any group of pixels that can convey information. And anything, any picture, any a piece of the picture, any group. So that's what our basic decision making deals with, is a group of pixels. So when we go to do this, we want to make sure that our group of pixels, if we're doing basic decision making, can be seen. And I'm going to give you a couple examples here of different heights of our groups of pixels. So this is text, and this is what we saw a lot, is a lot of text. We had a lot of information to convey, and so we put it on a PowerPoint or a slide. And you know, if you're sitting, this actually is a 1% element height. That means the text on this screen is 1% of the image top to bottom. 1%. So this group of pixels here only takes up 1% top to bottom. Now, as a rough, kind of a rough thing, I want to multiply for basic decision making. We have what they call an acuity factor. I want to multiply that acuity factor by 200. So that 1% times 200 gives me 2. 0.01 times 200 gives me 2. That means I should be able to comfortably read 1% text height 2 times the image height. So if my image is, say this monitor is a 10-inch monitor, I should be able to comfortably read this text 20 inches back. More than 20 inches back, I'm going to start having some eye strain. Now, as you can see, this text looks really small on this screen. And if you measure it on your actual screen right now, on my preview here, it's only about 5 inches tall. So if I scoot to 10 inches from my screen, I can comfortably read this. But when I start scooting back to 18 or 20 inches, maybe 2 feet back, it gets to be a little bit more cumbersome. So if I go up bigger text, same screen, now at 2%, I can see 4 times the image height. 2% times 200 gives me 4 times the height of the image. So my same 5-inch image height here that the window is in, now if I'm 20 inches back, 4 times the image height, the height of that overall image, I should be able to read this just right, 2%. Here's a 3%, so I can go 6 times my image height. Now, as you notice, my text gets bigger and it gets easier to read, but I lose real estate. So this is one of the things we can talk about with our clients, is where's that balance between the amount of stuff I can actually put on my screen and the furthest viewer. Now, if I have a really far furthest viewer, I might not have a choice. I might need a bigger text height or element height. If I have a closest furthest viewer, I can get smaller elements. Now, I haven't talked about screen height yet, except for the relation of the percentage to the screen height. If I have a furthest viewer, say 50 feet, at 50 feet, that would be 600 inches. If I divided 600 by our acuity factor of 200, that gives me 3. That tells me at 50 feet, 600 inches, no matter what my screen size is, I have to have at least a 3-inch element to be discernible at 600 inches. So if it's on my iPhone and my iPhone has a 4-inch tall screen, I can still see a letter that's 3 inches tall at 50 feet. I can only see one letter, but I can see it. So that tells me if I am looking for a size of the screen, I can do a couple things. First, I get my furthest viewer, figure out what that is, divide that by 200, get the element, figure out how much content I need to put on my screen, and then say, okay, I'm using roughly a 2%. I have a 3-inch. That means every percent is 1.5 inches. That means I'm going to need a 150-inch tall screen if I'm going to do that. That's a big screen. So maybe we get a smaller screen and we make our content bigger. And this is one great way to save money. Like a 150-inch tall screen, I don't even think I could fit into this room. 150 inches tall would be 12 and a half feet. and I have a 10-foot ceiling, so that wouldn't work from floor to ceiling. This allows me to kind of work the numbers around and say, okay, I can fit so big a screen in, and I need, say my screen is 6 feet tall. That's 72 inches. I need a 3-inch tall character. So that would be roughly, let's see, what is 72-inch tall screen? That means 1% would be 0.72 inches. So if I had 3 divided by 0.72, I would need roughly a 4.1% element height on that screen for that size of screen to be able to see at that distance. You don't have to memorize all these numbers and everything unless you're going for your CTS or your CTSI or CTSD. We do have that calculator. You can go to that calculator length. And if you have two things, if you have, say, furthest distance and image height, furthest viewer and image height, you can enter that in, and that will tell you, it will recommend what your element should be. If you have an element size, say you have a graphic arts department and they say, yeah, we make our text for a 3% element height. That's what my department makes our PowerPoints for, is 3%. Then I have that, and my image height, I can say my furthest viewer is this far. So if I'm setting up a classroom and I have my display up, it doesn't matter if I've seen the display or not. I can measure that display, know that it's going to be 6 times the height of that display because of my 3% element. 3% times 200 gives me 6. 6 times that image, it will be my furthest viewer. That's how far back I would put seats in that classroom. There are a few more variables too when we have that analytical decision making, that separate task. The acuity factor for that is 3438. So I can now, this, since this is not just the element, but it's the single pixel, we start using resolution. So my furthest viewer, for example, my furthest viewer would equal image height divided by image resolution times 3438. And I actually have that calculation on my PowerPoint. Image height divided by image resolution equals multiplied by 3438 equals furthest viewer. So for 1080p, if I have an image height of 36.8, and I didn't arbitrarily pull that number out, that is a 75-inch diagonal LCD display, has an image height of 36.8 inches. So if I have that image height and I have a 1080p display, I can do, and now with division and multiplication with PEMDAS, our order of operations, we can kind of mix division multiplication around. So I have my image height times 3438 divided by 1080, and I get 117.1 inches or 9.8 feet. So if I'm trying to look at something that requires pixel level detail for a 75-inch diagonal, that's 9.8 feet out. That's a different task from basic decision making, from looking at letters and numbers and words and pie graphs or pictures. Now, these two standard classifications are for these specific tasks. When it comes to things like passive viewing, and I call passive viewing primal instincts, less than basic decision making. Like basic decision making, 2 + 2 = 4, 4 + 4 = 8. If I have 8 chairs, I can move them around like this, or if I have two pie charts and I can compare the two, those are basic decisions. Primal decisions are, I have to go to the bathroom. A sign that says restroom way off in the distance, I can see it. It kind of says restroom, but instinctually I'm going to run there. That's a primal decision. So we don't really have a category for that, because you can really pick one out. And usually it's on signage that we're walking by, or it's on a directory that would incorporate a basic decision, something that you would get close to, and you could say, okay, I'm 1 times the display height. That can be, 0.5%. And full motion video, we don't put into our DISCAS category, because full motion video nowadays, most people watch it like this, and you can get your screen closer. So full motion video also encompasses more of the screen. It's actually meant if we do it properly, we're in a cinema or dark room, a home theater, and it's meant to give us an experience. So it's all encapsulating. It's not just the content, but it's the space and the technology and the environment too. We want the room to be dark. We want, it to elicit feelings. So if it's scary and it's bright outside, we want it to be dark inside so we can still get scared, right? So these two categories, basic decision making and analytical decision making, that's where we take our DISCAS. And this helps us out in audiovisual installs for our classrooms, for huddle spaces, for conference rooms, training areas, things like that. And again, so here's another nice little thing. If you are curious about DISCAS, about some of the ways we actually use DISCAS, if you go into YouTube and you type in DISCAS and my name, Chuck Espinoza, I actually have a 2-part podcast. They're about an hour each, and I go through the entire DISCAS class that I do. And it gives you a better understanding of how the DISCAS standard is applied, how we would utilize it. You can get a basic understanding of how to use the calculator and why some of these things came up, why the acuity factor of 200. And that acuity factor of 200 and the acuity factor of 3438, again, it's all based in math. If you download the standard, vixa.org/standards, we have the standard there. If you download the standard, in the back of it tells you the math on the acuity factors, how we got the tangential math about how to see an angle. And it tells you all the math about how we get closest viewer, furthest viewer. And again, there is a closest viewer calculation for the size of our image, for how high up our image is, not just how tall that image is, but how high up it is, because that top of the image is going to dictate where we're looking. If we get past 30 degrees looking at the image, then we start to move our head, and it starts to get starts to strain our muscles more than they should. So I think I am just about out of time. I got about 30 seconds. So I will leave it here. If you are curious, again, about the DISCAS standard, display image size for 2D content and audiovisual systems, you can go to avixa.org, avixa.org/standards/DISCAS calculators/DISCAS, and it'll tell you about DISCAS, and you can figure out how to use a calculator. And if you'd like more information, please hit me up, leave a message in the association chat on Facebook, or you can contact me on Twitter at Mad Sound Guy, and I'd love to talk to you. And there's my timer.
Wow. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. What did you think? We got so much great value from Chuck Espinoza today, who always has good information for us, but especially for so many of us who have to think about how our audience is receiving our message. If they can't see it, if they can't see what we're trying to show them, then what good is it anyway? So thank you so much, Chuck, for sharing your 21 in 21 talk with us today. For everyone watching, you've now become 21 minutes smarter. What are you going to do with that knowledge? What are you going to do with that information? Please know that all 21 in 21 talks can be watched live or as replays on the Association Chat YouTube channel, so be sure to subscribe. And in the world of Association Chat, we know that beyond these 21 minutes, we must keep asking questions to learn every day. Because why? Because as Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Have a great rest of the week, everyone.